What is up, Chalk Talk Nation viewers, fans, family members? Welcome back to the podcast. It's like, wow, it's been a long hiatus for Noah and I, but we're happy to be back in the saddle here. Of course, it's the off season. We stop as soon as the season starts in 2020, but Noah and I had a lot going on in our personal and professional lives, and we'll kind of talk about that a little bit and just kind of reintroduce the podcast again and all that good stuff. And Noah, it's great to have you back as always.
It's good to be on the grind again. It's been a long time coming. And I know we both had things that came up, and we kind of boxed ourselves in with the live stream, so we're taking a little bit different approach. One thing that's really funny that I thought about as you were introducing it, I think the last time I was on the podcast, I had said that when we were starting up again, that there wouldn't be baseball, and I was saying that because I thought COVID would cancel the season.
Right.
But coincidentally, we're starting it back up again, and I'm on again, and there's no baseball. So
it's just funny how that all works and trickles down, but it is what it is. At least we're back in the grind. Like I said, we're back in the saddle, ready to go. A lot of stuff has happened during the off season so far, and unfortunately, there aren't any actual winter meetings just due to COVID-19 still. But what happened to the podcast? People might wonder. So Noah, I know you had a job over the summer.
yeah, so as people know, because I kind of started this job while we were still on the tail end of our last off season, I guess, group of podcasts. And basically it just got to the point where I was traveling throughout the week and every weekend, and I just wasn't available to do the live stream every week at 6, because usually I was somewhere on a baseball field doing some sort of showcase or tournament. So we rounded that up. I think our last event was like the middle of November, and so then it took us a few weeks to get things rolling here again to where we both felt comfortable with how things were going to be done. But it's good to be back now. I think we're in a place now where we feel like we can do this with our new jobs, especially not boxing ourselves into a certain hour every week. I think it's kind of going to be the biggest thing. So I'm really excited to get back to it.
Yeah, it's all about time management, and it's different when you have to transition to a new job and whatnot, and then we have all these precautions, things going on, whether you're being quarantined or for me, I had to go up and help with family. I had to coach on Sundays. It wasn't feasible for the both of us at the time, but we finally found our calling. We're back here, and we're excited to start this podcast again with everyone. We had a lot of people listen in on our previous episodes, which means a lot to us, and hopefully we'll never stop. But I do want to mention that our podcast will kind of be sporadic just for a little bit, but we'll be sure to post on Twitter and social media when we're going to be recording an episode. And of course, you can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and our website, chalktalknation.com, which is free to subscribe to. You can get a newsletter. You can get our holiday newsletter. You can get updates when we launch a podcast or when we do an article. And also, for those listening out there, if you're ever interested in writing about sports, you're passionate about baseball, whether it's college, high school, professional, even minor league ball or independent league ball, feel free to shoot us a DM or email us at rob.rundle@chalktalknation.com, and we'll be more than happy to kind of talk with you about some potential opportunities with us. But just kind of moving forward and whatnot, there's a lot to cover, so we should probably just dive right in. The big thing that just happened recently was the name change announcement for the Cleveland Indians. So we saw earlier this year that the Washington Redskins, they dropped their name and are now the Washington Football Team. And there's been speculation, some good ideas for the new team name for the Cleveland Indians. But first, Noah, what is your first response to the Cleveland Indians announcing their franchise name being changed?
I mean, my immediate response is just, it's time. I think that I heard somewhere today that they've had like 5 separate Native American different tribes like reach out to them and like, hey, like, we're not comfortable with this. Will you consider changing the name? And this is not a new thing. This has been going on for a while now. Mm-hmm. We saw them kind of transition into this a couple years ago. They got rid of the Chief Wahoo,
yep,
logo. It'll be interesting to see what they go with. I know very briefly they had toyed with the idea of changing their name just to the tribe. But that still caught some backlash because it's still kind of the same realm of naming ideas. So they're going with something completely different now. I don't know if you have any personal stakes in it yet, but personally I'm hoping for the Cleveland Spiders, something they were a long time ago. I've also already seen a lot of really cool jersey mock-ups on what it could possibly look like. And so I've planted my flag in the Cleveland Spiders allegiance as far as hoping for a team name, but it'll be interesting to see what they go with. hopefully it's not a situation where we end up next year with the Cleveland baseball team, kind of like what happened in the NFL. I'd like to see maybe a bit more rapid of a progression to get to a new team.
Yeah, but to be honest with you, like the Cleveland Baseball Club doesn't sound as bad as the Washington Football Team because we have select baseball teams that are called that, and just it's not as bad. But when you talk about the Cleveland Spiders, I am absolutely on board because for one, they can keep their colors, they can keep that nice red and that nice blue. So for those who have not seen the logo yet, I highly recommend that you do a quick Google image search. All you have to type in is Cleveland Spiders logo, and you'll see that it's a C, and they incorporate the C as the body of the spider, and then they have legs coming out of it. So they don't even really have to change a whole lot, and it's just a lot better than the C. And out of respect, we understand why they got rid of Chief Wahoo, but just seeing a C on the Cleveland Indians hat and like their jerseys, it wasn't the same. And I think it is time, and baseball purists are going to be upset, because for those people who are fans of one of the best movie franchises of all time, the Major League series with Charlie Sheen, but times are changing. And so the real question is too that I have for you, what about the Atlanta Braves? I know that they talked about getting rid of the chop. I think they already did that.
Yeah, I still think that they're probably they'll change name here in the next year or two. I think that it's one of those situations now where we are as a society that it's just time to move away from that. I think that, you mentioned baseball purists. I think that they're probably going to be a little bit crabby about it at first. And then I think we're going to see like a year ahead from now, people probably aren't going to care anymore. It's going to be it's going to be a moot point at that point. One of the interesting things that I've seen come up a few times, and I'm curious to get your take on it, and we're going to see a lot with this episode, that owners are trying to save as much money as possible, and they're trying to gain back revenue where they can. Someone said that the decision for the Indians to change this now after their ownership group has been pretty staunch in wanting to keep the Indians might be a way to sell new merchandise to start making back some money. I was curious what your thoughts would be on that.
I mean, if you really think about it from an internal perspective, it's really kind of crappy the way that they're going to make money if they do that, but it goes hand in hand. I think all in all, baseball is a business and they're going to need revenue, owners, stakeholders, all that good stuff. So I think it might be a good idea. Especially it would be kind of unique. I'm not going to lie. I'd buy a Cleveland Spiders like jersey shirt like what I have on now. I think it'd be pretty cool, I think it's a really good time where they can promote with their marketing team at least and really kind of hype up the team name and stuff like that. Maybe make it like I don't know if you would call it a LeBron special, but maybe just have like an MLB Network special where like, oh, here are the 3 final team names, and then like they mark it down to 1 and then it gets everybody hyped up or something. I don't know. But yeah, that's kind of my take on it. But, it's kind of interesting that you mention owners and how they want that revenue back. And it seems like they're going to be even more mad transitioning because it seems like the 2021 season, the owners, they want to push the 2021 season back until May, until players are vaccinated, like when there is a full public vaccine. So it looks like they would cut the schedule down from 162 games to 140. Now, obviously, we all want baseball back and everything like that, but I'll tell you what, 140 games is a lot better than 60.
Yeah, this story, like you said, it broke today, so this is hot off the press news. So obviously, there's probably going to be a lot of things that change between now and the beginning of the season. It wouldn't surprise me if they could start May, possibly even before then, just because as we saw when the COVID stuff first happened, it seemed like teams were more privy to getting COVID tests than the general public was. And so I would imagine that's probably going to hold true with the vaccine as well. Ultimately, this is a good thing. Player safety should be the number one priority during this time. I question whether player safety is really the motive or if it's just in a way to try and make some extra money. We saw with the Marlins, the Cardinals, the Indians all had trouble managing stuff last year. Not to mention the absolute blunder that was the Justin Turner situation in the World Series where they let him go out on the field for COVID while he has tested positive for COVID. So I wonder how seriously the MLB is taking safety compared to just let's make some extra money. Frankly, I think they can fit in 162 if they start in May. I know we talked like 60s. Definitely worse than 140. I would definitely be happy with the 140, but I think 162 is definitely possible, especially if they do something like a destination World Series like what they did this year, where it was, in a warm climate in a place where they have a dome, then I definitely think it's feasible. You know, they could do 7 inning doubleheaders as well, something that they did last year that I think, could kind of help get them to that 162 mark. The last thing is that I know you mentioned player, I guess labor, trying to cut costs, prorated salary, stuff like that. I frankly, I don't want to hear it over like 140 to 162 games. Like, just pay them the full amount. It's
Yeah.
not that big of a difference. I don't know. So that's my take on it. I think it's something that'll change a lot and evolve as we get closer to spring training. But that's currently where I'm at.
Mm-hmm. And for those listening, if you're an avid baseball fan, or if you're not an avid baseball fan, maybe you found our podcast and you're trying to get into baseball, spring training, you typically play basically a month, or really the first week and a half is pitchers and catchers. And then the rest of the team shows up and then they enter squad, all that kind of stuff. We saw that in the summer training in early July. So they would be looking at potentially a mid-April start or early April start for that. So it's basically you're just pushing everything a month back. And the way I look at this is you can really change the schedule and play around with it, because when it comes down to the nitty-gritty, division games are essential and imperative for placement in the standings. We already saw the MLB postseason expand from 10 to 16 teams, and we'll talk about that here in our next little segment. But that does, promote mediocrity, and we talked about that. And so if you have 162 games, you could fit them into a 140 game schedule, if that makes sense, because you're left over with 22 games. The way you do that, you play double headers against your in-division opponents. So for instance, if you're the Oakland Athletics, you're only playing double headers against the Houston Astros, the Los Angeles Angels, Texas Rangers, and the Seattle Mariners. And so that is essentially, you really only have to play maybe one or two double headers against each team, and then you make up for the 162 games. So, and obviously, how can you not be romantic about baseball? I think the playoffs this year were spectacular. And even if they got pushed into November, like you said, if it's a warmer climate, I think that could be something that'd be very interesting. But obviously the TV deal kind of messes things up a little bit. But that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that spring training is kind of something that could be toyed with. I think we saw this year they had spring training, then all this stuff really hit, and then they had a shortened kind of second spring training. And I still feel like a full spring training is going to be necessary. But I think one of the things that they could probably get away with doing is just withholding games between teams until everyone's vaccinated.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they could still send guys to spring training as long as they're, following the same guidelines that they were following when they were at the alternative sites this year. I think that if you do that, you can still let pitchers and catchers report, start letting guys get their arms stretched out. If it gets to that point where you're starting to get closer to the season, you can start doing inter-squad games, and then just hold off on playing other teams until everybody's vaccinated. And then that way you don't even have to push the season back that far. I think that would maybe be the better route to go, but it'll be interesting to see, as you said. But yeah, you mentioned the playoffs a little bit, and if you guys haven't seen, Rob recently posted our first blog article back on our website, Chalk Talk Nation, and you talked a little bit about the playoffs. So do you want to talk about your article a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So yesterday I posted an article about the 2020 postseason and how it worked and how it should be implemented permanently. Now, I know you might be thinking, Rob, you just said it promotes mediocrity. Yes, but postseason baseball is exciting. And when you have your team in there, especially if, for instance, you're a Blue Jays fan, that's exciting. It's been since 2015 when they had Josh Donaldson when he won MVP, when they went to the playoffs. Like, that is exciting. And they got a chance to play a 3-game series against the Tampa Bay Rays. And, it's electric. And I think that's the thing, too, is we've already seen so much change with baseball in 2020. For instance, this year was the first year professional baseball, Major League Baseball, was played in Buffalo since 1900. And then we have the universal DH come in. So why not expand the playoffs? It's a good trial and error. And really, I didn't see an error with it at all. They had neutral sites. It was really awesome. So I think the most unique part of the neutral site games were that, so you had 16 teams, you had 8 teams from the American League, and you had 8 teams from the National League. So you had obviously your 3 division winners for the American League. So for instance, you had the Oakland Athletics, you had the Minnesota Twins, and you had the Tampa Bay Rays. The Tampa Bay Rays had the best record, therefore they were the number 1 seed. So then the third seed was the top wild card. So technically the next best second place team. And that was, I believe, the Cleveland Indians. They were a 4 seed. And so then how it worked is it was the first place and second place team in each division. So 2 teams from the AL West, 2 teams from the AL Central, 2 teams from the AL East, vice versa for the National League. And then the next 2 best teams in their respective American League and National League divisions. And the one thing that I've been advocating for a couple years now, because my team has suffered, is a 3-game series in the wild card round. And I thought that was so amazing, and it just goes to show why, yet again, the Oakland Athletics this year lost the first game in the playoffs, right? Typical season, they're done. How is it that a 162-game season, 3 to 4 game series matchups with all these teams, it all just comes down to 1 game? I understand that people are going to love this. It's exciting. And I do agree with you on that standpoint. But how exciting is it for a team when they lose the first game and then they win the next 2? Very exciting finishes. Exactly what the A's did. They were down quickly 4-0 to the White Sox in Game 3. Here comes a 3-run blast by Sean Murphy. Like, you just don't see that. And that's something that baseball needs. And they did such a great job. And so, just furthermore, the wild card round, the top seed, they got to play at their home ballpark. So that was kind of the prize. So Tampa Bay, they played at their stadium. Oakland played at their stadium. Cleveland played at their stadium. And the Twins played at their stadium. Vice versa for the National League. And then the next series, the Divisional Series and the Championship Series for the American League, they actually played at National League ballparks, which is really cool. So it really evens out the level of play. So we're playing in San Diego, Los Angeles, while the National League teams, they're playing in Arlington and Houston, which are American League teams. And I just thought that was really cool and unique because you never see that. And then, of course, the World Series was a neutral site, and it was the first time fans were allowed into the stadium, obviously at a reduced capacity, at the new ballpark at Globe Life Field in Arlington. What a great way to introduce a new stadium than a neutral site World Series. And obviously we all want Game 7s, but I'll tell you what, that was some of the most exciting 6 games I have seen in a World Series. And furthermore, I guess, and I'd ask your opinion too, Noah, it just came out today, Major League Baseball is in talks of expanding the playoffs. So it'd go, instead of 10 to 16, it would be 10 to 14 teams. So it would just be, you have your division winners and then the second place team in the divisions. So what are your thoughts? I know I talked a lot, but what are your thoughts on the expanded playoffs and what I just said to you in proposal?
Yeah, I think I fall, like, I don't 100% disagree with you, but I also don't 100% agree. I think there's, 16 teams was really cool for this year because it's a 60-game sprint. You don't really know the true talent of these teams because you're only getting about a third of the sample size. And so it's really cool for this year. Same thing goes for the neutral site games. I thought it was really fun for this year, a really unique thing. The atmosphere for the World Series was a lot more electric than what I had thought it would be with limited capacity and not being at either team's home ballpark. And so that was really cool to see. But with all that being said, I don't like a playoff where you've got multiple teams under 500 getting in. Like, that to me doesn't scream we're having the best of the best play.
But isn't it exciting though if a team below 500 beats a top seeded team? Wouldn't that be really exciting though?
See, but I don't think they should be in that position anyways, because the point of the World Series is to crown the best team, quote unquote best team, because it's it's one of the top teams that's in there. So as it's currently stated, you have the division winners and you have the 2 wildcard teams that were the next closest out, which is a fine setup. You mentioned the 14 teams. I could go either way on that. I think it's fine at 10 the way it is. The one thing I 100% agree with is that you should have more than one game in the wild card.
Thank you.
I think you and I have both, been big fans of that since the wild card was created, because it shouldn't come down to one game.
Right.
For the same reason that, like, in a one game, I believe it was a few years ago. I hate to rip off old bandages, Rob, but I think that the Athletics played the Yankees,
and then the Rays.
Yankees jumped. Well, the Yankees jumped out to a big lead early on, and then, like, that takes all the wind out of the game, and it's no longer an exciting game to watch because one team's up 7 runs. There's no more real consequence in the game.
Yeah.
But if you know, okay, well, they get to come back tomorrow and they've got another game, and if they win then it's going to game 3. I think that's a lot more exciting for both fan bases than it is to just have a one-game playoff.
Exactly.
But, the other thing about having so many teams in the playoffs is like what you mentioned at the very beginning, is that it promotes a lot of mediocrity. If I'm the Brewers or I'm the Reds or I'm the Cardinals right now, I know I only have to get one of the top 2 spots or be one of the top 2 third place teams to get into the playoffs right now. So why would I go out and spend money on a big player, whether that's a Real Muto, a Springer, or going and trading for a Lindor or a Story? Why would I go do that right now if I know all I have to do is get in, it'd be roughly a 500 level team. And I don't want to see that for the game, because I want to see teams that are going out and being as competitive as possible. One thing that wasn't mentioned that I think maybe could be thrown in that might help, it'd be pretty radical, but I think just get rid of divisions for playoff seeding might be a way to kind of mesh the two. Because right now, the way the NL Central is looking, they've added, between all 5 teams, they've added 4 major league caliber players, the best of which being Noah Ramirez. And that to me does not strike a division that's, trying to fight tooth and nail to get to be a first place team.
Right.
And so I think if you remove the divisional aspect of it, and you just have, all right, this top 6 teams, 8 teams, whatever it ends up being, are the teams that get in, then I think you see a bit more competitive edge between those teams that are in that 5 through 8 range, because they know they can't just bank on being a third place team to get in. And so that's kind of where I'm at with it. I'm not really for 16 teams, at least not as it's currently constructed. But I don't mind expansion, and I definitely think there's room to work with to kind of toy with the playoffs more.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, and like I said, it does promote mediocrity. But for me, I think it'd be really exciting to see, Hyun-Jin Ryu, for instance, for the Blue Jays. He shoves in one game. It's a pitching matchup. It could really shift and alter the weight of the series or the game. And I think that's something that's different than the NBA. So we know the NBA is the true definition of promoting mediocrity. Basically, the 6 through 8 seeds are like 15 games below 500. And it's just the 8 seed hardly ever wins. I think it's really only happened once in the past 10 years or something like that. But with Major League Baseball, I feel like it's matchups and like who's hot that day and whatnot. I think it's a little bit different, but I definitely understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, it is a little bit different, but I guess my side of it is I don't want it to become like the NBA. And I feel like if we start letting teams be that,
we'll have a Golden State Warriors.
Let's just get in by the skin of our teeth as an 8 seed. And the playoffs are fluky as it is, so maybe we advance if someone has a good start. I don't want teams to depend on that. I'd rather them go get guys and be like, we're going to be a top seed. And, obviously home field advantage, being awarded the top 4 teams for the first round helps with that. But I don't want us to develop into a league where mediocrity is okay. It's just where I stand.
All right. Well, I think we can agree to disagree, and that's perfectly okay. That's good. And on to our next topic. We'll just kind of transition right along. And so this was something that I'm actually really, really sad to see. And it's no universal DH in the National League as of now. Doesn't mean it might not change, but as of now, there's no designated hitter in the National League. Noah, your thoughts?
This right here, this topic, sums up exactly everything that is wrong with Major League Baseball right now. We flip to something where you get an extra guy in the lineup. Teams are more competitive because you don't have this dead spot at the end of your order every 9 guys. It extends the careers of guys like Nelson Cruz. It does all these great things. And I've been one in the past to argue against the DH, but frankly, to me, let's have both leagues have the same rules. It should be first and foremost, and we finally got there this year, and then we're taking it away. And what really just goes to the craziness of the league right now and how disorganized it is that Manfred came out and said he told teams operate under the assumption there will be no DH in the National League for 2021, and then right after he said that, you see guys like Ken Rosenthal, Jeff Passan, Evan Drellich, some other writers all put out reports that say all of the executives still expect there to be a DH in 2021. And so, if the executives don't even trust their own commissioner, how does that speak to the state of the league?
Yeah, it's an absolute mess with Rob Manfred at the helm right now, and I completely agree. Trevor Bauer for commissioner, love that hashtag that fight. I think it's hilarious. But no, I mean, and from a baseball purist standpoint, I understand the whole strategy part of the game. But the thing is, you have the three batter minimum, unless you come in with two outs and then you have the half inning, then you don't have to come in. But it's like, do people really want to watch a pitcher bunt or hit? Like, baseball is already losing popularity, and it's such a sad thing to see, especially on TV, because you really only have two working angles. You have the stagnant one looking at the pitcher and catcher, and then you have wherever the ball is. That's really it. Might be a little bit different if you're actually there, because you can embrace everything. But when you're watching the game at home on TV after a 9 to 5, you want to. I mean, you want to see people hit. And you don't want to be like, okay, here we go, 2-out rally. We got a guy in first and second. Our pitcher, who's been shoving, let's say it's Clayton Kershaw, he's been shoving for 6 2/3 innings or 6 innings, whatever. And then it's like, do we pull him or do we let him hit? Nah, we're going to let him hit because he's pitching good. You know what I mean? And then he grounds out or strikes out. And it's like, well, now he's putting himself in jeopardy because he could have potentially gotten 2 runs and a base hit to the gap if Chris Taylor was hitting as the DH for some reason. You know what I'm saying? And it's just like, it's time for baseball to evolve. They've already changed other rules, like the 3 batter minimum and other stuff. It's like exactly what you said. Just have the same rules in both leagues. I don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, it's having a huge effect on the market this year as well. I mean, guys like Nelson Cruz have come out and said, we're not going to sign until there's like some clarity as to whether or not there's going to be a DH. Because like a guy like Nelson Cruz, who's around 40 years old, I don't know if he's
mashes baseballs though.
Yeah, absolutely mashes baseballs. But he's not going to want to sign with a team like the Brewers and then have to play left field. Because at this point in his career, all he cares about is hitting dingers. And who can blame the guy? And really, that's what it comes down to. Baseball is at a point right now where the popularity of the game is just on a steady decline. And if they want to turn that around, the game's going to have to be fun, which means that all these unwritten rules are just going to have to go away. And it just comes down to home runs are fun, regardless of what the Texas Rangers and their manager and players want to tell you. Home runs are fun. And the guys like Tatis and Acuna and guys like Nelson Cruz, who just hit 40 home runs a year, are good for the game. And so I don't see why we're getting rid of this. But MLB makes no sense. Manfred makes no sense. So that's kind of where the game is.
And I will end it on this too. It just goes to show why Josh Donaldson signed a 4 to 5 year deal with the Minnesota Twins in the American League, because he's 36, 37 now. And so it was kind of found that, okay, when Cruz retires, they'll just move Josh Donaldson to the DH, or you can put Miguel Sano at DH and not have to worry about it. So, and it really does extend those players' careers. We already took the lefty specialist career. That's already gone. Those guys, no more. Most of them. Why are we doing this to the DH guys? It's just not fair. So
even for me selfishly, like as a Reds fan, like having the DH is going to extend Joey Votto's career, which I think, personally I think is a great thing, because I think he's one of the better hitters of this generation. But, he took a big step back defensively this year at first base. And so, it kind of handcuffs the teams, the Reds as a team, if they're stuck leaving him at first base instead of just being able to go, here, you're good at hitting, the glove's not there what it used to be, so you're just going to DH, you're going to focus on hitting, you can be a 400 OBP guy and be good for the lineup and not hurt us on the defensive side. And so, it's just sad to see that taken away. I think we'll see it come back in the negotiations, after this year when they have collective bargaining agreement stuff going on. But it's just sad to see it go now for that, and that it's also probably going to become a bargaining chip for the ownership group when it comes time for the collective bargaining agreement. And so it seems sad to see that come off the table and be something that's going to have to be renegotiated for, where the players are going to have to give up something to get it back.
Right. And, that's something I'd like to mention too, something good that came off the table, and we'll just kind of transition even more. $24 million. Robinson Cano. Declined defensively. Has not hit for anything. The only thing he's been hitting are PEDs. That was a really bad transition. Either way, Robinson Cano tests positive for PEDs, and he is suspended for the full 2021 season. This isn't his first rodeo with a PED suspension. When he was with the Mariners, he got suspended, and he will forfeit his $24 million in salary, which has to be a blessing and a dream to new ownership Steve Cohen. Noah, what are your thoughts on this with Robinson Cano moving forward?
Well, first off, what an absolute gift for Steve Cohen to receive upon buying the Mets. You sign the dotted line, you become the owner, and hey, right away, here's a certificate for $24 million in salary.
Hey, that could go towards Trevor Bauer.
It really could. It helps them this year. Obviously, he's still owed another $48 million combined between 2022 and 2023. Mm-hmm. But, this is it's a bad look for Robinson Cano. He's a guy that, take PEDs out of it, he's probably a borderline Hall of Famer. He's a guy that has a real good case to be argued to be in. I think even with the first PED bout, he's probably a guy that's still going to get some votes. But now with the second one, I'm not sure that he's going to have enough to get on the ballot anymore. So I hate that for him because he's a guy that, we looked up to for a while. He's one of those kind of flashy guys, but in a confident way. Had a really awesome swing, in his New York days, and just to kind of see how the mighty have fallen is just unfortunate.
It is, and honestly, I have nothing else to say about it because, that's on him. It's the second time he's done it, and so that's what he deserves. You forfeit your $24 million, and, changes are coming. Changes are coming. And speaking of changes coming, like you said, Steve Cohen, new ownership for the Mets, a billionaire. Absolutely delighted with this. Like you said, early Christmas gift. We'll talk about some staff changes, but first of all, Steve Cohen, and it looks like he really has a good mindset with the Mets. He was able to get Marcus Stroman to sign on a 1-year, $18.9 million qualifying offer. As we know, Stroman was kind of holding off on that, kind of shopping around a little bit, but then, he felt connected with Cohen, and he liked the direction that he was going with the team. And hey, it's a good start so far. You brought back Stroman, and why not go and get Bauer? But what are your thoughts on Steve Cohen buying the Mets?
Steve Cohen buying the Mets is probably, at least in my opinion, the best thing that has happened to baseball in the past couple years.
Yep.
Because of how much of an impact he's had in the month or so that he's owned the team. The Mets were a team that have been the laughingstock of the league for the last 15 years. He buys it within the first month. They're already talking about, let's look at guys like Springer. Let's look at guys like Bauer. Let's look at guys like JT Realmuto. They opted with a different catcher, but they're in the conversation suddenly for all these guys, and it's not like a joke. He's good for connecting with the fans. I see him he's on Twitter all the time. He interacts with people on Twitter. He did a Q&A right after he bought the team on Twitter. He's the only owner that I know of that's not that already famous for some other reason, like a guy like Derek Jeter or Magic Johnson, that even has a Twitter that I know of. Mm-hmm. And so I think, we've seen this big wave of players come up that are young talent that are good for the game, but it's good to see something from the ownership side, because I think the feeling of a lot of fans is that ownerships are really in it just for the money and not for caring about the game of baseball. And so it's just nice to be able to look at an owner for once and go, I know this guy cares about the game.
Yeah, it really is. And that's something I think New York has needed there in Flushing, is they needed someone to come in and just start right away, because they've had a really, really good rotation and bullpen the past couple seasons. Now you add Marcus Stroman in another year. Who's to say that they won't extend that? You never know. But you still have DeGrom. And then if you bring in Trevor Bauer, and if Noah Syndergaard, I'm pretty sure he'll still be out because of Tommy John, but he might come back maybe mid-year, late in 2021. Either way, this team has a really bright future ahead of themselves, especially for not having that great of a farm system. What they're able to do right now, especially signing James McCann, 4 years, $40 million, that is huge. Just a guy like that. And just really happy that Steve Cohen is going the direction. It'll be interesting to see how the Mets shape out to be in the next 2 to 3 years in a very, very tough NL East division. But going down, we're just going to go down the rankings here of staff changes. So Steve Cohen, that's the owner. We're going to step on down a ladder. We're going to go to the Marlins. new general manager. Yet again, more women in sports. You love to see it. You saw Sarah Fuller score the first points ever in a Power 5 conference game in SEC for Vanderbilt. And the list keeps going on. We have a coach, assistant coach for the San Antonio Spurs. And now we have our first ever Asian American female general manager in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, this is, nothing short of awesome. Kim Ange has, she came from the position working as a senior vice president for baseball operations with like the MLB, their official office. She's worked with the White Sox, the Yankees, and Dodgers in the past. So she's been well qualified to have the GM position for a long time. And it's awesome to see her finally get her chance to see what she can do. I think it's great that she's inheriting a team that is already on the come up, kind of jumping ahead of their competitive window. And the Marlins, already making the playoffs this year. A lot of good pieces with Brian Anderson, Sixto Sanchez, some more prospects on the way. I think it's going to be really interesting to see, what she's able to do with the team. And I guess look out NL East because, I think that the Marlins are on the come up. And real briefly, you mentioned Sarah Fuller, which is also another amazing thing. But how criminal was it that Vanderbilt couldn't even get into field goal range their first game that she played?
It was absolutely atrocious. I mean, but it's Vanderbilt football. What do you expect? They're 0-9, so it is.
Speaking of train wrecks, we could talk about the new Chicago White Sox manager.
Yeah, Tony La Russa. Now, for those who don't know, you're like, oh my gosh, Tony La Russa, Cardinals manager? Oh my gosh, that's amazing, right? Yeah, I thought so too. And then, of course, like the day after he got hired, would you like to elaborate, Noah?
He had a pretty well put quote that he is a Hall of Famer baseball person. And that quote may or may not have come while talking to a cop while he was being arrested for a DUI. This, taking the DUI out of it for a second, Tony La Russa is a horrible hire for the Chicago White Sox. They're this young, fun team. Luis Robert, Tim Anderson, Lucas Giolito. You've got all these fun guys. Eloy Jimenez. You've got this good, energetic team of all young guys. And then you bring in this dinosaur to come manage.
He hasn't even been in baseball in the past 8 years, at least.
Yeah, I mean he's been working. He's done some front office roles and he's done some higher exec roles. But like, I don't see how he was the winning candidate for the job.
Especially with baseball changing and evolving. It's like how, yeah. And
then he just gift wraps this reason for the White Sox to fire the guy. Like, I mean, he just gift wraps it, give it to him, early Christmas present. And they just said, you know what? We're going to stick with our guy. And I can't believe it. Luckily, we were blessed with the beautiful "I'm a Hall of Famer baseball person" quote. And that's the only good thing to come out of this. I'm sorry, White Sox fans, that you're going to have to deal with Tony La Russa. It's not a good situation in Chicago now, especially like Tim Anderson's already come out and said that, that he doesn't approve of Tony La Russa. He's not a fan of the guy. Marcus Stroman said before he'd accepted the qualifying offer with the Mets that he wouldn't come anywhere near the Chicago White Sox. So why would you be hiring a manager that, players are already coming out and speaking and saying, we don't want to play for this guy. And then you get the opportunity to fire him and you don't do it. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me either. And honestly, as much as I hate to say this, I actually think A.J. Hinch would have been a really great fit for the White Sox as a manager, just for the simple fact, obviously he's a player manager. He knew about them cheating and didn't say anything until Lord knows when. But, he still knows the game. He's been in baseball and whatnot. I think you kind of look at A.J. Hinch, who got hired on as the manager for the Tigers. It's kind of this similar situation, a lot of young guys, amazing farm system. They drafted Spencer Torkelson out of Arizona State, big bat, even gave him some reps in the second spring training. They're going to be really good, I think, in the next 2 to 3 years. I mean, that's the great thing about baseball. I can just switch like that. But it doesn't make sense to me why they would bring Tony La Russa, who hasn't been in a manager role in pretty much over a decade. And especially bringing in, like you said, this young core talent with how baseball is evolving. You're seeing a lot of smaller guys hitting with more pop, hitting gap to gap, and, using the statistical stuff to their advantage and all that kind of good stuff like that. That's all I have to say about it, because that's just shocking to me. But what isn't shocking to me is the rehire of Alex Cora to the Red Sox.
Yeah, and that partners with AJ Hinch as well, going back to the Tigers. I don't think it's a surprise to anybody that we're seeing these two guys managing teams again. AJ Hinch was a great manager in his time in Houston. Now, obviously, you had the cheating stuff, which really takes away from that. But like, even just as a personality guy, everybody seemed to like him. The Astros, when he became manager, had a pretty young core. And so that's something that can probably be replicated, with the Tigers, with Casey Mize and Spencer Torkelson coming up through the ranks. They've got a good young core that's going to be coming together. And so I think AJ Hinch will mold the Tigers in a good team. The Alex Cora one, I think, was the most unsurprising thing ever, especially after they just gave their bench coach the interim tag for a year and didn't even try to go hire a new manager. It became pretty clear that this was just a let's run out the clock for a year, hand the keys back to Alex Cora, which, was within their right, and I don't blame him, because Alex Cora is a good manager too. He's had previous success in Boston, and so why not go back to the guy if MLB is not going to prevent it?
Yeah. And speaking of which, good success. You go back to 2018, you look at that World Series. Kind of talk about our next staff change. Dave Dombrowski hired on as the Phillies president of baseball ops.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I think it's going to be a real change of pace for Philly, because we've heard all offseason so far, we've lost all this money. We can't sign JT Realmuto back. There has been word of, possibly trading Zach Wheeler to get out of his contract, and even a few whispers of them maybe even trying to move Bryce Harper. And that's like the complete opposite of the Dave Dombrowski mentality. He's known for being an aggressive guy. Mm-hmm. I still think his hands are going to be tied this offseason, just because of how the Phillies as an organization have talked about this offseason and not being willing to spend. But moving forward, I think it puts them in a better place than where they have been. And, they're probably not going to spend much this offseason, but I think this at least makes them a real contender for bringing back JT Realmuto.
Yeah, I do too. And especially in that tough NL East division, where it seems like now every team has a really good chance of at least coming close to winning their division. And I never thought I'd say that with the Marlins, but we obviously saw how well they did last year. And you and I both said from the get-go that, they could be a surprising team, and lo and behold, they were. But I think the interesting thing with Dave Dombrowski was that he said, with my time here in Philadelphia, we are looking to retool, not rebuild. And I mean, I think that's the right thing he said, but I didn't know the Phillies were in a full rebuild stage. But I do think it kind of hurts having that big Harper contract for sure.
Yeah, I don't, it's hard to buy into what GMs are saying these days. Like, I remember when the Reds were going into their rebuild, they called it a retooling and not a rebuild, and we saw how that went. So I'm not ready to buy into the retooling phrasing. But I don't think they're going to be a team they're going to break everything down, since they've hired Dombrowski. The other interesting hire they actually hired away from the Reds, was Caleb Cotham to be their new pitching coach. The Philadelphia bullpen last year was an absolute dumpster fire. They had like an almost record-setting high ERA. It was an absolute mess. To nobody's surprise, their pitching staff was managed by former Reds manager Brian Price, so no wonder it was a dumpster fire. So bad, even so, that he just decided to retire after last season, which is what opened the spot in the first place. So, I think that makes them a much more desirable place for a pitcher to go. Caleb Cotham's worked with Derek Johnson these last couple of years. He's been it's going to be a big loss for the Reds organization, and it's a huge get for the Phillies. He's a driveline guy, which also helps. I think that, this is going to be good for them moving forward, especially when they try to bring in new pitchers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really good signing. It's a loss for the Reds, but other than that, it is what it is. Speaking of loss by the Reds, Dick Williams steps down as the Reds president of baseball ops. And Noah, since the Reds are your favorite team, I'll let you take this one as well.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and group in Theo Epstein with this as well because both of them
Yeah.
left baseball for the same reason, and that's because they knew that their windows on their teams were, coming to a close. We've already seen with the Cubs, they're getting rid of guys like Kyle Schwarber. They're kind of at the end of their window. Anthony Rizzo's getting to the end of his contract. Chris Bryant's getting to the end of his contract. Javi Baez's getting ready to, he's got one more year on his deal. And so basically they're at the point now where it's time to sell off all their pieces. Their window's over. They got their one World Series. So Theo Epstein's just stepping out of baseball completely. And, it's a smart decision for him because it saves his reputation as a baseball operations guy. The same can be said for Dick Williams. I mean, he was kind of handed the job, because he's family member of a minority owner of the Reds. And frankly, he did a really good job of it. He modernized, the Reds after taking over for Walt Jocketty, who just hates analytics. And so, he did a lot of good for the Reds. He steps away. Bob Castellini is now tightening the purse strings, and we're trading away Raisel Iglesias, non-tendering guys left and right. And so it makes sense why both of them would step away because it just saves their reputation.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you on that. And with Theo Epstein, for those that don't know, he actually won 2 World Series as the Red Sox GM in 2004 and 2007, and then he joined the Cubs in 2012. And obviously, as we all know, he won the World Series against the Indians in 2016. And I definitely think it's the right idea. Who's to say that Theo Epstein doesn't come back to baseball in a couple years, maybe as a different role? I saw an article where that could be in talks, but obviously it's too early to tell. But definitely the right move. Speaking of right moves, though, some signings. There's one that really, really stands out to me, I'd say, as a really, really good signing, and that is the Charlie Morton 1-year, $15 million deal with the Braves. That deal, I think it's great for how old he is, having it be 1 year. The Braves could either ship him out or keep him for the 2021 season. I definitely see him staying on with the Braves, just adding even more depth to a very, very good pitching rotation and bullpen. Charlie Morton is a guy who has proven time and time again in the playoffs. He can be a guy that can eat you innings as a starter or a reliever, and I really, really like this signing.
Yeah, Charlie Morton's a guy that, going into last season, there were concerns about whether or not he was going to play again. He ended up signing a 1-year deal with the Rays.
Mm-hmm.
And, coming into this offseason, there was the question of, is he going to want to play again and where is he going to play? Because he didn't really want to leave his family in Florida. He wanted to be close to home was kind of the rumor. And so, to see him go to the Braves is not entirely surprising because, they're just ahead of the Florida border. And, it's a great get for them. I think $15 million is probably a bit of an overpay.
It's a little bit much, yeah.
But a guy like Charlie Morton, and it being only 1 year, I think you can get away with it because I think you know what you're going to get, and that's solidly above average pitching. The Braves are going to be a formidable force this year. Mike Soroka is going to come back at some point from the Achilles stuff. Max Fried really solidified himself as a solid pitcher. Ian Anderson really stepped up in the playoffs. They've got a lot of really good guys. They signed Drew Smiley to a 1-year, $11 million deal. A little more questionable there, but you're just continuing to add good arms. And so I definitely think it's a good get for them.
Yeah, either way, he's going to eat innings for you if you need him to. On the good side of things, like when you're winning, he will be able to eat innings for you. He can come out of the bullpen in the 6th, and he can pitch the 6th, 7th, and 8th, and he'll be good to go. So I really like that signing. One signing that I think is absolutely horrendous is Kevin Gausman, the 1-year, $18.9 million qualifying offer for the Giants. I think this is not the right move for the Giants, especially if you're looking for solidified arms, trying to get some young talent and stuff like that. I don't think Kevin Gausman's the answer.
Yeah, Kevin Gausman is probably better than what you're giving him credit for in that introduction, but I didn't see him being worth the $18.9 million qualifying offer.
Mm-mm.
I was surprised they extended it to him, but also I think that it's probably a situation where it's a guy the Giants are comfortable with. They're not sure what the market's going to be like in a year like this. And, they've got some payroll. And so Like they're a team that's not very good right now, but they have a larger payroll, and so they can afford to do this, especially with it being a 1-year deal. Like we just talked about with Charlie Morton being a little bit of an overpay because you know what you're going to get. I think Kevin Gausman is probably in that same boat for what the Giants have right now. I mean, I don't expect them to be super competitive, but he's a guy that's going to eat innings for them, and I think it'll be fine.
I mean, we'll see. I mean, he'll definitely eat innings, but I think it's going to be when they're down by 9 runs. But we'll see. We'll see. And then there's a couple more really good signings here so far. But the last one that really stands out to me is Carlos Santana, 2 years, $17.5 million to the Royals. I do think it's just a little bit much, but you look at this guy still producing at first base, and I am 100% taking Carlos Santana over Ryan O'Hearn at first base. And there's no one that can tell me otherwise. I think it's really good to have that veteran leadership. When we saw him with the Phillies briefly, he was mad that the teammates were playing Fortnite. I think that was back in 2017 or 18. I don't remember. Then he obviously went back to the Indians. But I think this is a good get, and he stays in the AL Central, so he's very familiar with the pitchers in this division. I really do like this signing, and I think you have a very solidified right side of the field with Whit Merrifield and Carlos Santana. Of course, if Whit Merrifield plays second base, he'll probably be in the outfield, but just to keep in mind. But good signing.
Yeah, this Carlos Santana himself as a player is a great get. He's quietly been like an OBP king for like the last 8 seasons.
Yeah,
he's always a guy that's around that 400 mark. It'll be interesting. He's always mashed when he's been with the Indians, and then he went to the Phillies and he struggled and came back to the Indians and mashed. It'll be interesting to just see, kind of as a quirky thing to see if he can continue production on a team other than the Indians. Carlos Santana's a good get. I'm not exactly sure why the Royals are the team that are going out and getting a Carlos Santana right now.
Right.
It
works.
He's a great addition to any team. It's just the Royals are not a team that are really in their competitive window right now. You see the White Sox going out and getting better. The Twins are still a good team. The Indians, they're selling off pieces, but they're still, a pretty good team as it currently stands.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that the Tigers and the Royals are maybe on a similar track, with the Royals maybe being a little ahead, but, 4th place in the AL Central is not big into your competitive window. So this just seems like an odd move for me. Maybe it's a guy that they know they're going to get production out of, and maybe it can kind of help lead them into that next productive competitive window. And then if not, then he's definitely a good trade piece. So, it'll be interesting to see what they do with him.
Yeah, definitely interesting. But those are really the big signings that I kind of wanted to mention and talk about briefly. But were there any that you want to talk about, or you want to move into trades?
There are a few that I want to talk about. One I want to briefly talk about is 1 year, $8 million for Robbie Ray for the Blue Jays is a very, very interesting decision by the Blue Jays.
That is interesting. I'm surprised by that.
It gets them, a guy that's going to throw some innings.
Give up a lot of home runs.
He was really, he's been really good at times. He walks a lot of guys. In fact, this is why I wanted to bring this up, is because of this fact specifically. So last year, halfway through the season, Robbie Ray got traded from the Diamondbacks to the Blue Jays. But Robbie Ray, in only half a season, was able to lead the entire National League in walks. In his time with the Diamondbacks, he had a whip of 2, which is just insanely high, and a 7.84 ERA. He went to the Blue Jays and had a more respectable 4.79 ERA, but he still had a 1.74 whip. And I get that the pitching market is pretty thin, but Robbie Ray was the first guy to sign. And I don't know. If you're trying to be competitive, I'm not sure he's the guy I would have gone with in this market. But if the Blue Jays are just looking for options and guys that will eat innings, and maybe it's kind of a lottery ticket, maybe he figures it out, and then we've got a steal at $8 million, then I guess it's the right move for them.
Yeah, it's very weird. It's very odd because, Rogers Center, it is a pitcher-friendly ballpark, which is good for Robbie Ray, for goodness sake. Robbie Ray does punch out a lot of guys, though. He's just the kind of guy, he's just going to throw it. He'll grunt when he throws. Wherever it goes, it goes. Whether it's 450 dead center, in the dirt, or right down the middle for strike 3. I mean, you really don't know what you're going to get. They have Hae-Young Ryu, the lefty that they signed last year, with with the Blue Jays and just adding another lefty, like you said. It's just interesting. I mean, it is a 1 year. I don't know if they're going to trade him because, I mean, $8 million is pretty steep unless when they trade, a team is going to eat part of that contract. But I don't know, man. It's an odd one for sure.
Yeah, and speaking of odd ones, this is the other one that's really interesting. AJ Preller and the Padres signed Mike Clevenger to a 2-year, $11.5 million deal, and the first of the 2 years is basically just going to be spent rehabbing an injury. This to me, and AJ Preller is a guy that's he's a bit odd in his tactics, but this strikes me as a move to try and get Bauer to San Diego.
Yeah.
We saw with the White Sox when Manny Machado was a free agent, they went out and they signed Yonder Alonso, who was a cousin of Manny Machado's, to try and lure him to go to the White Sox. I think this is going to be a similar move where the Padres are kind of hoping, hey, we got your best friend out here. You'll be able to pitch with him whenever he gets back to being healthy. You're also from San Diego area, went to UCLA. Let's get you out here on the West Coast. So that's what this strikes me as.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting to give a guy a multi-year deal while you're rehabbing the arm injury. If he comes back, it's a steal at $5.5 million for what Mike Clevenger can be. But it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, that's everything that you said is basically what I was thinking. I mean, I understand, but I probably would have done just a 1 year, $5.5 million, just because, I mean, like you said, rehabbing, but just to give him that time and give him that solidification that, hey, we want you here as a Padre. Really, they're trying to get Bauer. I don't know. We could talk for days and days about that, but
right.
But yeah,
I have 3 quick hitter points, and then I promise we can move on.
Okay.
I know I'm sticking with the whole trade or with the whole signings thing. One, I want to commend the Mets for being willing to spend money, because that's not something we're seeing a lot of right now. In fact, I think that they might be, other than the Braves, the only team that's made multiple signings so far. Marcus Stroman at $18.9 million for next year, Trevor May for 2 years at $15.5 million, and James McCann for 4 years, $40 million. It's good to see Steve Cohen come in, buy the team, and do what he said he's going to do and spend money. I think that, a lot of times you hear ownership groups talk about, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and then it never happens. So it's awesome to see that happening right away. Hunter Renfroe for the Red Sox just signed, I believe yesterday or the day before, for 1 year.
He signed with the Red Sox, right?
Yeah. Dude absolutely mashes lefties. This is a steal for the Red Sox because $3 million is not a large price, and he also comes with 3 years of team control. So after this year, if they like him, they can send him to arbitration or work out another deal with them. So love the steal for the Red Sox, especially because they need outfield depth right now. And the last one I want to mention is David Dahl, the Rockies. One of my fellow contributors over at Diamond Digest is the one who actually started the Dahl to Detroit hashtag. I don't know if you've seen that over Twitter the past couple of days. So shout out my man Scott Bentley for that. But he would have made perfect sense in Detroit. He makes good sense in Texas as well. 1 year, $3 million deal is not, again, it's not much. The only thing is just going to be, can he stay healthy? Injuries have been a huge concern for David Dahl. He's only played 100 games once in his career. He was an all-star that year, but, it's just, can he stay on the field? And if he can, then it's going to be a good get for the Rangers.
That's one thing that you mentioned with David Dahl. I think you are going to see a healthier David Dahl because, I mean, when you're in the mountains, when you're mile high, it is a little bit harder to recover and stuff, and you do get winded more often. You're more susceptible to getting injured. I think it'll be good for him because basically every team in the AL West, it's going to be warm. Whether you're in Seattle and it's raining, close the dome. Oakland, nice and breezy. LA's LA. Then you got Houston, obviously Texas. So I think it's a good move for him, and especially having Joey Gallo out there too. I think it's going to be pretty nice, and I think it's actually a steal for the Rangers. If you can just try and get as much production out of him as you can, that'd be great. So, yeah.
All right, you want to move on to some trades?
Absolutely. I'll let you take the throne.
Yeah, so there were 5 trades that have happened so far this offseason, some of them more important than others. We go ahead and get the least important them out of the way. The Reds acquired Jeff Hoffman and pitching prospect Case Williams from the Rockies for Robert Stevenson and Jamison Hanna. This is basically swapping lottery ticket for lottery ticket, and Hoffman for Stevenson. Case Williams has a chance to be something, especially with Kyle Bodie and Driveline kind of heading the process in Cincinnati. He's a big spin rate guy up in the 2500s with his fastball. Good breaking stuff as well. And, the Reds are only giving up Jamison Hanna, who's 23 and struggling to hit in high A. So not really a whole lot going on there. One that does have a bit more impact on the market is that the Angels acquired shortstop Jose Iglesias from the Orioles for a couple of right-handed pitching prospects. And why this is important is because it's signaling that the Angels have no interest in bringing back Andrelton Simmons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's going to be the really interesting thing. And one thing that's really deceiving to people listening at home or if you're watching on YouTube, Jose Iglesias, he was a star defender in the early 2010s, outstanding, and he hit for average. He actually had the best batting average with the Orioles, best hitter in general. The only problem is his OBP is so low and his slugging percentage is so low that batting average counteracts, so it's kind of misleading. Yes, he might hit in the high 200s, but really his slugging percentage might be just even below 700. So that's something to keep in mind, but that is interesting that they're not really considering, or as it looks, to consider bringing back Andrelton Simmons. But honestly, with Trout's contract, and if they do bring Bauer aboard or if they try to make a really solid pitch, it might be hard to afford Andrelton Simmons. So they might be able to trade Andrelton Simmons and then get some more pieces back. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I will say Andrelton is a free agent, so they're not going to be able to trade him.
My bad.
But I do love this deal for the Angels for the pure fact that Jose Iglesias and Andrelton Simmons, to me, are basically the same player. They're both guys that, they have decent bat-to-ball skills, so they can hit around the 270 to 300 mark in a full season. But they're not going to walk. They're not going to hit you for power, but they're going to give you Gold Glove caliber defense up the middle, and they can get that in Jose Iglesias in the form of $3.5 million, where a guy like Andrelton Simmons commands like $10 million. So for them, it's great. Like you said, it opens the door for them to go spend some money elsewhere. I really hope it's on pitching because that's what they desperately need, and I would very much like to see Mike Trout in the playoffs. So Angels, please get that done.
Yeah, Angels have only been in the playoffs one time in Mike Trout's career, and pretty sure they got swept. But, you talk about needing arms and everything like that. I think the Angels got a good one, even though people in Cincinnati might be, I don't know, maybe agree, disagree. I don't care. But Angels acquire right-handed pitcher Raisel Iglesias in cash from the Reds for right-handed pitcher Noah Ramirez and Leonardo Rivas. And Noah, I would love your take on this because for me, I think Raisel Iglesias was really, really great 2 to 3 years ago, like outstanding. But just closing out ball games, man, he struggled. What is your take on this?
Yeah, I want to quickly apologize that my dog's barking in the background. So if those of you at home can hear it, I'm truly sorry for that. But this is an absolute dumpster fire of a trade if I've ever seen one for the Reds. Raisel Iglesias has been an elite closer for the last 5 years. He gets all of the flack in the world because occasionally he blows a save. He had the media outcry comment about where he's like, I only want to pitch in the ninth inning in a traditional closer's role. And so those are bad things, and I get why Reds fans, are prone to not liking the guy. But, when you look at the numbers, he's been well above average for the majority of the time as a Red. He's going to go down, whether guys like it or not. Presently, he's probably going to go down as one of the better relievers in Reds history when it's all said and done. And so we traded him. It's the right move to trade him because there's no need for us to be paying $9 million for a reliever. That's just a lot. But to then send cash with him to the Angels and then only bring back Noah Ramirez, who was terrible last year and basically has the potential to be an average to maybe a little bit above average reliever, and a shortstop in Leonardo Rivas, who's 23. He's a switch hitter, but he's never played above high A, and he's a career slash line 236, 328, 377.
Not good enough.
In high A ball. Like, that's just not going to get it done if you're trading elite level back in the bullpen help.
And cash. They're giving him cash,
right,
too.
And cash. Not to mention that Nick Kroll went on MLB Network today and said, oh, we basically need to rebuild our bullpen because we don't have enough pieces there now, and so we're going to need to reconstruct that. But then you look at it and you go, well, you just trade away Raisel Iglesias, you just non-tendered Archie Bradley, so what are we doing? So
Yeah.
great trade for the Angels. It's helping solidify their pitching staff because they desperately need it. But I don't know what the Reds are doing.
Yeah, basically the Reds got fleeced, and like I said before, like I said, Raisel Iglesias was amazing 2 to 3 years ago, and he has one bad year, if you even call it a bad year. I mean, yes, like you said, he blew a couple saves and everything, had the media outburst and whatnot. But it's just typical of the Reds to do that, I feel like, especially now. But kudos to the Angels for getting a pretty good right-handed pitcher to help Hansel Robles out in the pen. That would be kind of nice. A nice eighth, ninth inning punch right there.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where Raisel Iglesias has a home run problem in Great American Ballpark, which, like, who doesn't? But that's what basically got him crucified by Reds fans, and so hopefully that changes when he goes to Los Angeles. Getting to one of the bigger trades, this one happened, here recently within the last week or so. The Rangers traded Nate Lowe and a couple of prospects for.
Do you mean the Rays?
Or yes, excuse me. The Rays trade Nate Lowe and a couple of prospects and receive Heriberto Hernandez and a couple of other prospects. This is kind of an interesting deal. It's the fourth one that the Rays and Rangers have done in the last 2 years. So they're kind of becoming trading buddies. Basically, this is just the Rays fleecing teams again. We've all heard that. It's basically a broken record at this point. They're trading from, where they've got a wealth of players. G-Man Choi is probably going to step in and immediately be the starter for the Rays. They've got Yoshitomo Satsugo, who they signed as well, who could probably take innings there. And so, they had the opportunity to move Nate Lowe, and he's going to be a good piece for the Rangers. But then they get back this Heriberto Hernandez guy, who's a career 320, 450, 653 hitter in the minors, with the potential to possibly make it as a catcher. And so, for me, the Rays won this deal, but I think that the Rangers are still getting a good player in Nate Lowe.
Yeah, I definitely do. Nate Lowe is a good ball player, and they're also getting a couple other good prospects from the White Sox, and I'll kind of transition to that. They're getting White Sox, one of their top prospect pitchers of the Michael Kopech, Dane Dunning, and left-handed pitcher Avery Weems for Lance Lynn. And for this one, I actually think this is a good deal because the White Sox, they have that right-handed arm, solidified veteran coming in. Lance Lynn has shoved in the past 2 years with the Rangers out of nowhere. It's like, okay. Because we remember him when he was with the Cardinals. He was really good too. Kind of fell off a little bit in Minnesota, but really good with the Rangers. And so the White Sox got that immediately. And then the Rangers, they needed prospects. They needed arms. So they got Dane Dunning. He's a good guy with a hard slider coming up in the works. And then they have that left-handed southpaw, Avery Weems. So I think that's a good deal as well.
Yeah, I absolutely love this deal for both teams. To me, Lance Lynn strikes me as a guy that will fit with, I guess, what is the new culture in Chicago with the White Sox. Mm-hmm. He seems like a Tony La Russa guy. He's coming from the Rangers, who were all about the unwritten rules last season. He's an older player. I think him and Dallas Keuchel are probably two guys that are going to get along really well in that rotation. And the Rangers, I think that they got better long term. Dane Dunning's a guy that projects to be a 2 or 3 in a solid rotation.
Yeah.
In a couple of years from now. In 34 innings pitched, a 3.97 ERA last year. It's still a small sample, but he proved that he can pitch at the big league level. He's going to be an immediate addition to the rotation. And then, I really like the Avery Weems guy that they got as well. 2019 6th-round pick. Went into rookie ball, a 2.09 ERA, 74 strikeouts to only 10 walks, and reports on him have said that the stuff has gotten even better since then. So he's not a guy that's going to step in and immediately impact the major league roster, but he's a guy that I could see, coming into this season, maybe being in high A, pitching there, and then moving to double A and maybe straight to the bigs, by the end of 2022. So they got a couple of really good impact pieces to help them in the long-term future, and the White Sox get a guy that's going to help them next year as they go towards the postseason.
Yeah, it's a great way to break up the monotony of right-handed pitchers in their Major League Ball club here in a couple years. I mean, you have Dallas Keuchel, but you really do need another lefty, and Avery Weems looks like a good candidate in a couple years, like you said. Give him some time in the minors to really solidify himself, get that arm Major League ready. So, but I think that's about it for the trades and everything like that. Do you have anything else that you want to say to our listeners back home?
It's good to be back. I hope that all of our previous listeners, if this has found you again, and we welcome you back. And if you're a first-time listener, then welcome. We hope to keep this going,
Absolutely. And be sure to follow us on Twitter if you're not already at Chalk Talk Nation. It would mean a lot if you could share this with your family and friends. And if you want to introduce some people to baseball, this is a great podcast. We try to tailor our podcast towards the avid baseball fan and also newcomers, breaking down everything as we can. We talk about all things baseball, Major League related, even sometimes personal stories from high school, college, anything really. So we'd like to thank you all for tuning in to this week's podcast, and be on the lookout. You should get an email if you subscribe on our website for free at chalktalknation.com. You'll get an update every time we post a podcast episode. And you can also find us at YouTube if you search Chalk Talk Nation to watch the video version of the podcast. But until next time, we'll see you then.